Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. For those who have had demonic or ghost encounters, what's your story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
The first time I had a seizure, I saw an angel at the end of my bed. Think of it like sleep paralysis, except you're seizing and vomiting. I lay there choking, watching this crazy angel just slowly get closer. It was terrifying and so unsettling. I can see why Angel Gabriel told Mary to not be scared. I went to uni in South Africa, and I lived in a flat apartment that was next to a hotel. The Radisson, actually. My light would every now and again switch itself on and off, which I figured was an electrical failure. But the creepiest would be if I left the room for a few minutes and came back to find the light on or off. Like even the switch would be pushed down. I used to sleep with my curtains open. One day I woke up and got to the bathroom. It was very late, like 3 a.m. My room was across from the restaurant. I saw a man walking across the restaurant in a tux, and I was like, odd. There weren't usually any people up there at night. I come back from the bathroom, and I see him walk past again in the same direction. At this point, I feel a little uneasy. I scooch closer to the window. Please note I'm in the dark while the restaurant lights are on so I can see this person, but they shouldn't be able to see me. The person again passes by, headed in the same direction. And now I'm really creeped out because I don't see them when they come back. It's as if there are many people who look exactly the same who are passing by the same spot. Anyway, the third time around he stops, turns, and cups his hands around his eyes while looking through the window, as if he's looking right at me. I ducked, crawled out of my room, and spent the night in the living room, LOL. I won't lie and say that I'm a skeptic, but I'm definitely like an ignorer. Like I never spoke about this while I lived in the place because that would make it real. But after I left, I was like, that place might have been haunted, if hauntings are a thing. Haha. Senior year in college, I was working late at night on an editing project for the campus TV station, which was located in the basement of the oldest building on campus. It was generally agreed that there was a ghost or presence in the building because things would move or disappear for weeks, only to reappear in a locked cabinet only accessible by moving a couch, etc. You get the idea. Anyway, back to the story. It was around 2 a.m. when I got up to go to the bathroom, did my business, washed my hands, and went to wipe them on my pants as I walked toward the door, when all of a sudden I heard the unmistakable ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk sound of the manual paper towel dispenser behind me. I look back, and there's a freshly released paper towel hanging there waiting for me. Not to be rude, I grabbed the paper towels, dried my hands, said thank you to the room, and got the hell out. I lived alone in a spooky apartment years ago. Sometimes, when I was drifting off to sleep, there'd be an almighty bang on my bedroom door that would wake me. It happened regularly. Then one day I was doing my hair in front of my vanity. A ring that was sitting on the table launched itself an inch into the air. I tried every way possible to explain how it jumped by itself, but I had to put it down to supernatural. I've had a good amount of paranormal instances, but the one that affected me the most was that I would always see this man everywhere when I was growing up. And I mean like the grocery store, at school, in my house, etc. I even saw him when my family and I moved overseas. He was always dressed in the same clothes and would never get too close. And he was never there for too long either. It was never creepy. It was just like he was checking in. And as I got older, I saw him less and less. By the time I was 16, I hadn't seen him for a while. And during this time, my father reconnected with his biological father's side of the family, so my grandpa's family. When my dad was 2, his mom left his father because he was mildly abusive and suffered a lot from the war, PTSD, addiction, etc. And since my grandmother moved away, she lost all contact with her in-laws, which is why my dad never really knew them. My dad met his father when he was 18, after my grandfather had sobered up and was actually an AA sponsor and ended up devoting the rest of his life to helping other veterans. Unfortunately, my life and my father was not over what happened with his mother or how he treated his mother, and just wasn't ready to make a relationship with him. Additionally, in his eyes, he already had a dad, which was his stepdad, and the man who raised him. My grandfather would die a year later from organ failure. Jumping back to when I was 16, my father contacted my woman, who claimed to be his cousin. She explained that her mother was my dad's aunt, and had been looking for him and his siblings for years. They all talked for months on the phone, and during the summer before my junior year in high school, my dad and I took a trip to visit his whole extended family. During this time, we could visit my grandfather's grave, get to know what he was like post-recovery, and reconnect with a family my father didn't know was looking for him. Their instant connection was so beautiful, and since that year, we have gone on holidays together, spent Thanksgiving and Christmas together, and seen each other as much as possible. But that isn't really the point of the story. The point is that when we were visiting his family, we started going through photo albums, and before this time, I had never seen what my grandfather looked like. So you can imagine my surprise when the man I saw for my entire life was the man I now call Grandpa. When I was pregnant with my second child, I would have insanely vivid dreams, usually just random things, but one night I dreamt about what I'd come to know as the Hat Man. I'll give a little background for context in the dream. My friend Anna recently moved to a different home, and her friend Charlotte moved into the old one. I and Charlotte were only acquaintances, but since Anna had lived in the home, I was very familiar with it. In my dreams, I was walking up to the house with my husband and my oldest daughter. I was coming to babysit for Charlotte. It was super foggy and dark, with no other houses around it, nothing but a man sitting outside of the fence. He had his back turned to us, just staring at the house as he sat in a wheelchair. The feeling I had was extremely uneasy, and something about the man was just off. As we approached, I got the sense that this man wanted to get into the house, but couldn't. He appeared to be middle-aged. Nothing stood out beside the wheelchair and his hat. It was a hat you'd see in a show like Peaky Blinders. The closer I got, the more I somehow knew that this was not a good person. In fact, he was not a person at all, but something pretending to be one. And the wheelchair was only a guise for him to seem like he was not of any threat. Don't ask me how I knew all this, it's just dream logic, I guess. I said to my husband as we came up beside him, almost passing the entrance to the gate, "Don't look at him, don't talk to him." For whatever reason, I looked at his face then, and he started to change. I can't really describe what he became, but as it grew and morphed, I could sense his anger fuming as he became this distorted, towering thing. We quickly rushed past him and into the house. He had disappeared. When I got into the house, nothing was right. It was abandoned and dilapidated, save for a worn kitchen table with 3 little girls, all in the same onesie. I could see 2 were twins and 1 slightly older. Now Charlotte only has 1 son and a toddler girl, and I've never babysat for her or met her children. I told Anna about the dream a few days later. I always tell people my dreams. I think they're entertaining and weird, and I'm sure anyone who has the misfortune of hearing about them probably just thinks the latter. She agreed it was a weird dream and said Charlotte had been talking about her son complaining of a ghost or something in his closet at night, scaring him. She told Charlotte about my dream, and shortly after, she reached out to me privately, and what she said sent shivers down my spine. Before her daughter was born, she had a miscarriage, twins, and her son had been intermittently telling her about some ghost that came out of his closet at night with a weird hat on. She also said that she had been extremely depressed and feeling very off lately. Charlotte asked if I'd ever heard of the Hat Man, but I never had. And just as well, the hat in my dreams wasn't the same type as the one her son described when he talked about the thing that was in his room at night. I told her all the details in my dream, and we ended our convo agreeing it was very strange. I didn't talk to her again after that. Honestly, I had forgotten about all of it since I was so busy with a toddler and would be giving birth soon. My pregnancy was hard, and postpartum was harder. I immediately had severe PPD, and honestly, my brain went to some scary places during that time. I don't want to get into that part much, but I'm really lucky to still be here now writing this. One day, a few months after I had my second daughter, I lay down on the couch to sleep while the baby sleeps. I was in some weird half-dream, half-awake state when I heard and felt someone come to the edge of my couch, standing behind where my head was. I got the feeling it was a man, and he was frightened. Just as fast as he appeared, he disappeared, and someone, rather something, was left standing behind him. The sense of dread I felt throughout my entire body was so intense. I felt heat burning through my body just before I jerked awake. As I opened my eyes and jolted upright and turned to face what was behind me, I caught a strange glimpse. It was something like a fleeting shadow, just a black outline or shadow type thing. A tall man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Then in the blink, he vanished. What the hell did I just see? What the hell just happened? I don't even know why I said anything. I just came out of me. Why? And in a quiet, retreating voice that was not my own, but unmistakably a man's, I hear, "Because you invited me in." After the initial shock and questioning my sanity, I realized that whether that thing was, it was the very same energy I had felt from the man in the wheelchair in my dreams months before. I'm not one to believe in shit like this. And quite honestly, it was the last thing I was thinking about since I was so busy and tired from the C-section and adjusting to a new baby. I googled the description of what I saw and scrolled through images. There it was, the dark silhouette, wearing the same hat with the captions, "The Hat Man." I need so many articles trying to piece together the strange experience that made no logical sense.
Hat Man seems like a pretty common theme in people's either dreams or sleep paralysis, etc. Yeah, glad it worked out, but that's creepy.
When I was 20, I moved into a house with my then girlfriend. It was a 3-bedroom rental in a decent part of town and really, really cheap. The only downside was the landlord didn't live in my state and didn't speak English, so no repairs or they took time. Thanks to a series of events involving my girlfriend's job, making her come into work and her brother being a flake, I ended up moving in everything by myself. 10 minutes into the move, I had the first encounter. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black dog looking up the stairs at me. I thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion, but then my dog, a large German Shepherd mix, who was upstairs with me, walked over to the stairs and started growling. Looking back, it was straight at me. The dog casually walked away. I ran downstairs and looked everywhere but couldn't find it. We both saw the dog a few more times and had a few other weird sights, sounds, experiences in the house, but that was one that was beyond a doubt a paranormal experience. It was what caused us to move out. Our master bedroom was upstairs. It was a particularly hot summer and the old AC wasn't cooling upstairs very efficiently. So we slept in a bedroom on the main level that I was using as my computer room or guest room. This room always had a weird vibe to it, and we noticed that our dog, who typically followed us everywhere, would not go in. Instead, he would just lay down in front of the doorway and wait for us. He was a little strange at times, so we wrote it off as that. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up being violently shaken. As I came to, I could feel a hand firmly holding my arm and shaking me back and forth. Thinking the house was on fire and my girlfriend was trying to wake me, I jumped up and turned around to get out of bed. That put me face to face with what a lot of people would call a shadow person. It was a black mass, vaguely in the shape of a human, but by the light of the streetlight outside of the window, I could clearly see it. I could feel freezing cold air pouring off of it. Thinking I was dreaming and my girlfriend was still trying to wake me, I turned around only to see her still in the bed, still sound asleep. I turned back around and the shadow was still there. Now, wide awake and full of adrenaline, I withdrew back away from it. After having sufficiently scared the bejesus out of me, the shadow slowly turned away from me, lumbered toward my door, and out into the hallway. My dog, who was sleeping in the hall, woke up and skittered backwards into the room toward me, terrified. I sat on the bed and collected myself before jumping back out of the bed and going to the hall. I turned the light on and of course it was gone. I didn't wake my girlfriend up, but I also didn't sleep until the sun came back up. I told my girlfriend about it the next day. We called the landlord and told her that we were moving out. I told her the house was haunted and we were not staying after the current inspection.
I was a math teacher for a few years. My third year teaching, everything started falling off my walls. I tried command strips, masking tape, double-sided tape, duct tape, and finally gorilla tape. Didn't matter. It never failed that I'd be in the middle of teaching and a poster or something from the bulletin board would loudly hit the floor. I eventually quit putting items back up and just had a stack of fallen misfits lying on the floor behind my desk. One morning after something fell, a student asked if I knew why everything kept falling. I replied no, and she said it's the ghosts. The children ghosts were playing and knocking things off the wall. She explained to the class that her grandparents were shamans and she could see ghosts or spirits. The kids freaked out, and I just went along with it every time something else fell, blaming it on the ghosts, having fun. The next semester it had stopped. Everything was sticking to the walls and back to normal. I saw that same student walking into the class next to mine and went over to the teacher. I asked if she had any issues with things falling off the walls, and her response was, "It's the strangest thing. I've never had this problem before, but nothing will stay up. I never had any issues before or after having that girl in my class. Only that semester. Guess the ghosts were following her around." When I was in uni, we rented a place that the previous tenant died in. Nobody found the body for weeks, lonely guy. When we moved in, my flatmate had a cat who hissed at one place in the upstairs bedroom hallway. We also had a closet that used to open on its own. Used to scare the shit out of us. The cat hissing at the white wall in the basement closet, always opening on its own. We would get home at 3 a.m. on a night out, and this cat would be going mental at nothing, and this door would just open. Between ages 7 and 17, I lived in a house that was haunted. My family always told me it wasn't, but my room in particular had a lot of activity. There were always things moving around the house, things turning on and off. Nobody ever wanted to be in the house alone. I remember a couple of times I would interact with a little girl who lived there until she woke me up one night, and I hollered for my mom, who also saw her. There was usually some whispering you would hear while you were upstairs. Something pushed my mom down the stairs. That's just scratching the surface. I've got a lot of stories from that place. We eventually moved out, my family still denying the house was haunted. My grandparents lived next door to the house and said there were a lot of people moving in and out. My grandmother talked to the landlord, who stated people claimed it was haunted. They finally had a rabbi move in and he blessed the house, stating there were several evil spirits he could feel inside the house. I'm now 30 and my mom admits it was haunted, and she didn't want to scare me. I was 13 when I lost my uncle and saw him walk by a doorway at my house he died in. It was a few days after we had his funeral. I was sitting in a chair facing the doorway when he walked by and vanished. There's a window that shines a light in the hallway, so it wasn't dark or creepy. He looked transparent, almost see-through, yet he looked grainy like a bad holographic, and solid at the same time.
He didn't look at me. He was walking like normal to the fridge. Long story short, he was a drug addict and alcoholic. I watched him drink himself to death on his couch and watched him walk back and forth to grab a beer. It's probably my brain's way of coping. But I've only one other relative that had died, and I've had a lot of family members die. I've also seen my grandfather. A few minutes after we lowered the casket, I look out into the cemetery, and a few yards away, I saw him standing under a tree. I started to feel light, and all my sadness went away. It was like he was showing me what he was feeling. It was like he was letting me know he wasn't in pain anymore. I have never felt that type of feeling again. When my other uncle died a year later, I didn't see him. I only saw part of me and my uncle and grandfather. I know it's not paranormal, but part of me still has hope and believes it is. I just love sharing my experience. This is super long, but I'll shorten it. Ages 4 to 8, I'm living in a house on the west side of my town. Ever since I was little, I had had odd experiences in this house. I was constantly talking to my empty closet, setting things like toys and dishes out in twos, and complaining to my mom about my blankets being pulled off me in the middle of the night. Of course, because I was a kid and could have had an imaginary friend, everyone took it with a grain of salt. Even when I said that the presence was a little boy about my age. My grandfather, who's a medium, came to the house one day for an unrelated incident. This was the first time setting foot inside. As soon as he did, he told my mom that his house was haunted, and that he didn't know exactly what the spirit was, but did know it died in a house fire. Yeah, Papa lost his marbles, right? Well, fast forward a couple of weeks later, and he comes back to help my mom pull a door in the frame off of the wall due to mold remediation. We had a leak close to the basement doorway, which was in the kitchen, and needed to be taken care of. As they peeled back the paint, they saw scorches and burn marks in the lining that surrounded it. So I've always been sensitive to the paranormal. My mom has told me strange stories about when I was a kid and things I would claim to have seen. Apparently these were things a 6-year-old wouldn't really know about. Anyways, fast forward about 14 years and I'm living with my grandparents. They purchased a home in a subdivision and picked a plot of land to have it built on. So they were the first and only people living in this home. So I have no explanation as to what I've experienced, but I would see shadows and little glowing balls of light here and there. Nothing too creepy, except the hallway. They had an L-shaped hallway, and my bedroom was at the end of the hallway. So if you were to take an L and turn it 90 degrees clockwise, my bedroom would be where the top of the L would be, and the kitchen/dining room/sitting room would be at the opposite end. So to get to my bedroom, I would have to have turned a corner and go to the end of the hallway. Right after turning the corner, we would feel a sense of dread, like something was right behind you about to snatch you up. But once you crossed the threshold to your bedroom, the feeling went away. This happened every time, day or night. Then there was one night when I, my grandmother, and my husband were watching TV. Just some comedy movie, I don't remember. Anyways, the den or computer room doors were in the living room. They were double doors and opened up wide. While we were watching the movie, we heard children laughing. The only child in the home was my 1-year-old, and she was sleeping on the couch next to my husband. So I got up and opened the den doors, expecting to see my grandpa on the computer watching some videos. The lights were off, and there was nobody there. We shrugged it off, finished our movie, and went to bed. The next morning, we were all in the kitchen talking about the previous night when my brother and his girlfriend walked in. They asked what we were talking about, so I told them about the children laughing. They both turned pale and looked at each other. Turns out they had a Ouija board and were playing with it that previous afternoon. They started to hear children laughing outside their bedroom and quickly said goodbye and then put the board in the den. I told them to burn it and we never heard the laughing again. My ex haunts me regularly. In broad daylight, I'll spot him walking across my workplace floor at least 5 times a month. and then he'll either touch me or say my name. Once he gave me a warning about a bad situation with a different ex by grabbing my shoulder. It felt just like a live person did it, and I spun around to find nobody there. For some reason, he likes my workplace the most. My sister also haunts me, much to her delight. Nothing like having a conversation with somebody and hearing her say my name very loudly next to my ear in that annoyed way only she could pull off. She doesn't seem to have a favorite place to be when she bugs me. A few years ago I was asleep, but I wasn't. I saw myself lying there, and a girl was standing next to my bed, my sleeping body. I saw myself, but I knew I was not in that body. She did not. She tried to communicate with me via telepathy or something by staring at me. First I thought she wanted to do harm. Then I felt like she was scared and wanted to tell me something but did not know how. The next morning, I woke up and was irritated. This dream was so different from the usual ones. I also remember that she looked like she had been through stuff. While I was still trying to piece it together, I went to work and opened the browser on my computer to look at the news, which I usually don't do. The first headline I see is a plane crash with school children on board, matching the age of the girl that stood at my bed. To this day, I'm convinced when I look at the pictures of the two of the girls that were on the plane that one of them was the one standing at my bed. There's one picture that shows them before departure, and it seems she was wearing the exact clothes I saw her with. Still gives me shivers thinking about it. Went to college for the culinary arts program. This was in a building that was old and had been used for mental health hospital Asylum. The building had been redone for most part, but some of it had old hospital beds with their IV stands and old leather shackles on the bed frame still. The basement had been used for a morgue, among other things, and that is where the kitchen was at. An old elevator ran from the main floor down to the basement, and we were always warned never to use it because it would stop, jerk, and sometimes lock up at weird times. Most disconcertingly, however, the elevator would sometimes unnecessarily open as you walked past, as if it were inviting you to test your fate. Several times I would be walking past it and the door would slide open and nobody is inside. Nobody even nearby. So we all would just nod and smile and say no thanks and try to walk past it without speeding up too fast. The other creepy part was that the power in the halls would flicker randomly, and it happened several times when the doors would invite you in. The chills you would get walking that long, uneven tile hallway that sloped gently down toward the elevator doors was so unnerving. This is something I usually just say to my close family and friends to give you some context. I live in the capital of my state, but used to have a great-grandfather in a little town around 3 hours away from my home. He died a couple of weeks before turning 101 years old, but that last bit is irrelevant, just a fun fact. The point is that my family used to visit him at least once a month, my grandparents, uncle, and some aunts, along with most of my cousins and parents, 4 to 8 cars full of people, but we never stayed there to sleep. At least that's what my family says, and it's almost impossible for me to have an afternoon nap. Insomnia is common for me. This is important later in the story. I believe I was haunted by something. Now I know they're called guardians, entities sent to a person to be stalked by it. I have a vivid memory of my family staying over to sleep on my great-grandpa's house. They gave us some hammocks and some blankets, yes, Mexican, and yes, it gets cold during the early morning before the sunrise. I tend to wake up at 2 to 3 a.m. Since I was 7 to 9 to have something to eat, 2 or 3 cookies, and we were in the living room. Near my hammock was a small table with cookies that my mom prepared beforehand, knowing I would get hungry and didn't want me or my brothers in their sleep to be bothered. In front of the table, that was the door that, while it usually remained open because it was a small, safe town and all the neighbors left their doors wide open during night, but since we were there, they decided to close and lock it to make us feel comfortable. Next to it was a big window with iron bars. The window was basically a wall. It extended almost from the floor to the roof and to column to column. I took a couple of cookies and ate them without looking up. I felt a chill in my body, something telling me by instinct that something bad was about to happen. The goosebumps didn't take long to invade all my body, and that's when I heard it. Tick, tick, tick. There was someone or something tapping the iron bars of the window, trying to get my attention. I looked up and saw a pale head with black veins with no hairs. The place where the eyes were supposed to be were empty, just pure infinite darkness, and it was smiling. It wasn't filled with endless razor-sharp teeth or unnaturally bended fangs. It was just a smile. The type of smile that was unnaturally big, taking 3/4 of its face with no tongue, pure darkness beyond the row of teeth. I could see its body, just the long neck and the long pale hands that ended with black tips and nails pointing at the door. I felt a compulsion to open the door and got nearer and nearer step by step, felt my mind trapped, screaming, but no sound from my mouth, while my body moved despite my unwillingness. I don't know what happened, but something snapped inside me. Then somehow, while my little hand was on the lock, I was able to regain my senses. I remember crying in silence and managing to get back to my hammock. The thing eventually left the window, not without reminding me it was still there with the endless taps on the iron bars. I don't remember how, when, or if I slept the rest of the night, but the next memory is my family receiving the news that my neighbor died due to a heart attack in the middle of the night. He was found next to his door. There's no way for me to confirm this since, like I said, while it was a vivid memory for me, as clear as the memories of my first kiss or the first time that I won a fight in elementary school, my family insists that such a thing never happened because we always left before sunset. Ever since then, I have a phobia of seeing a window wide open in the middle of the night. I always kept my curtains closed after sunset, but every once in a while I heard it, reminding me it was still waiting for me to open the door. Tick, tick, tick. This actually has a happy ending, but I'm at work. I'll edit it or add the comment ASAP. And I believe it or not, it's real. I don't care if you think this is creepypasta, or just me trying to get attention, or if it's mental. I know what I lived, and there is nothing you can say to change my mind. When I was 13 or 14, we moved into my grandfather's to take care of him. He had a tumor in his esophagus that just kept growing until finally it suffocated him. It was a pretty traumatic thing to witness. Anyway, after he passed, my parents inherited the house. There was always weird shit happening, but the one that really sticks out was one night I came in late and decided to sit down at the kitchen table for a snack. We had an upright piano in the living room, which was odd because nobody even played it. That particular night, while eating, one single note started playing on it over and over. It scared the shit out of me, so I kindly asked it to stop, at least until I was finished eating, and it did. After I finished my snack, I headed up the stairs to my room, and when I got about a quarter of the way up, it started again. I haven't lived there in ages and never told anyone that story. My parents ended up selling the house to one of my cousins, who had a 3-year-old daughter. One day my cousin overheard the little girl talking and giggling, so we went to see what was going on. When she asked her who she was talking to, she told me her mother, that she was talking to Grampy and used his name. This was a good 10 plus years after my grandfather died. It made me smile because I thought back to that night with the piano. It was good to know that he was hanging around watching us kids grow up.